So let's get underway. Our first talk on rights and responsibilities will cover many of the areas of your day-to-day lives and how the law affects you as a young person. Issues like employment and relationships and interactions with police or PSOs, all sorts of issues. And we are really thrilled to have Tim Hutton with us, who is an outreach lawyer with Youth Law, a community legal centre which provides free legal services to people under the age of 25 in Victoria. Tim mainly helps young people with their criminal charges and represents them in court. So let's get underway. Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Lynn. Good morning. Hello, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Lynn. Just give me a moment, everyone. I will share my screen. There we go. So, as Lynn has mentioned, I'll be speaking to you all today about legal rights and responsibilities, which is a pretty broad sort of topic. I'll be covering a number of things, which I'll get to in a moment. But I'll first just let you know sort of who I am and who Youth Law is. So for those of you that don't know Youth Law, we are a free legal service for young people under the age of 25. So many people have heard of an organisation called Legal Aid, and Youth Law is quite similar to Legal Aid in that it's a free service, predominantly government funded, but we're more unique, more niche in that we only help young people. What sort of things do we help young people with? Really, we'd like to say that we help young people with anything that comes up. We think we've probably seen it and have some expertise in the area. There's a number of things on the screen which are common issues that we see. Fines and debts, for example. Lynn mentioned, personally, I do a lot of work in the criminal space, so in the children's court and the magistrates court. Intervention orders, victims of crime, all sorts of things. And yeah, so we're a free service, and if you're under 25, then you're automatically eligible. And the easiest thing for you to do is if you have a question or you think maybe you have a legal issue you'd like to chat with a lawyer about, just give us a call or send us an email. We have a free phone service every weekday between 9 to 5. Usually we get back to you the same day, or if not the next day. So please don't hesitate to get in touch, even if you're not sure if it's something we can help you with, or if you're not sure it's really a legal issue. We're happy to chat with you about it and see how we can help, or if we can't help, find the right service for you. Okay, so that's that about Youth Law. Now, today's presentation that I'm talking to you guys about, legal rights and responsibilities, very broad sort of topic. You can see on the screen the types of things I'll be talking about. Firstly, on the street, so that's sort of talking about interactions with police or PSOs, that kind of thing. Relationships, so what you can and can't do in relationships and what to do if you're feeling unsafe. Employment, so I understand we've got years 10s and 11s, maybe 12s as well, I'm not quite sure, but so I'm thinking the age group of you is about 15 to 17, most of you. Might have some 18-year-olds, I'm not sure, but that's sort of the age range I'm targeting. And if you're 15 or older, you can now get a job. And I'm sure some of you already have part-time jobs. So I'll be just giving you some basic info about your basic rights and responsibilities in that space. Driving, so some of you would have already got your Ls maybe, or be thinking about getting them. And some of you might be close to getting your Ps. So be giving you some basics around driving. And then lastly, buying things. So what are your rights in terms of when you buy something and maybe you get a bad product or a bad service? What can you do? What can't you do? Okay. Now, as Lynn mentioned, we do have the Q&A function, which I will try. So very much encourage you as we're going to put questions in the Q&A as much or as often as you want. I will try and get to them live, but it just depends on how we're going for time, that kind of thing. But as Lynn said, if I don't get to them live, I will try to send out a response to all participants answering all questions that were asked during the session. Okay. And with the Q&A, there should be an option to submit it anonymously. So I won't even know your name. So there should just be a thing you can click where it says anonymous. So that way, if it's a little bit of a sensitive question, but you still want to ask it, yeah, we don't need to know who you are. But please, I definitely encourage you to ask away. Okay. Just having a look. There's a few things in the chat. All right. Well, I'll get started on this first topic, on the street. And you can see the sorts of things I'm going to be talking about, dealing with police, weapons, you've got the knife there, graffiti, alcohol, that sort of thing, okay? So firstly, interactions with police, with PSOs. So for those that don't know what a PSO is, the words there, protective service officers. I'm sure a lot of you would have seen these people around, or that logo there on the back of their top. And lastly, dealing with security guards or bouncers, that kind of thing, when you're going to maybe a venue. So firstly, with police and PSOs, the takeaway here is that they are very similar. They have very similar powers, but they're both employees of Victoria Police. PSOs are generally more junior and have much less extensive training than a police officer. But they do have similar powers, but PSOs only have them in certain places. For example, mainly PSOs only have them around public transport, so train stations and the like. But if you're in that sort of area, then they do have similar powers to police. And the powers that police have generally, they can't just come up to any person anytime and ask them for their details, or they can't just search any person anytime. There are certain restrictions on them doing that. So for example, they can only come up to you and ask you your name and address if they believe that you have committed a crime, or that you are about to commit a crime, or that you might have information related to a crime. Okay, so if one of those triggers comes up, or they reasonably believe one of those triggers comes up, then they can ask you for your name and address, PSOs and Victoria Police. One exception to that is at a train station, where they don't have to have one of those triggers. They can just ask anyone, okay? Now, if they ask you for your name and address, it is very important to comply. If you fail to comply with a request from police, that can be a criminal offence, okay? And a criminal offence can mean that you have a court date and maybe a criminal record. So it's very important to comply. Now, maybe police didn't have the right to ask you your name and address, so you can ask them, why are you asking me, why are you talking to me? And hopefully they give you, a reasonable answer. But it is usually best to just comply, just to be safe, because you don't want to be charged with an offence like that and have that going on your record. Now, police also have, as we know, powers to search people. And it's similar again, they can't just search anyone. They have to have certain reasons or beliefs for searching. So similarly, if they have reason to believe that you have something illegal on you, like drugs or a weapon, then they can search you, okay? And they also search everyone if they arrest you as well. Now, police and PSOs are very different to security guards. Security guards are more like just your regular person. Now, often if you're entering a venue, there might be certain conditions of entry. For example, they might be able to check your bag. Like if you go to a sporting event, they check your bags these days. Or if you're inside their venue, there might be certain conditions about if they suspect that you've maybe stolen something or something like that. But otherwise, they have the same powers as a regular person, which is very limited. So sometimes they will try and, do more than they're allowed to. So just be very careful if security guards are trying to search you, for example, or are trying to detain you. They can't always do that, okay? All right, just going back to my screen. Now, police body-worn cameras. You might have heard of these things. I just wanted to make a quick mention of them. when dealing with police, most of them these days are equipped with what you can see on the screen there. It's a camera on their chest. And the rules with police, their internal policies are that any meaningful interaction with the public, particularly if they're asking you details or if they're arresting or searching you, they're supposed to have that camera on, okay? So I just want you to be aware of that. And if you feel like police are maybe unfairly treating you, or you're a bit concerned about what they're doing, perhaps just ask them or remind them to put their camera on, because the idea of these cameras is to increase accountability, okay? And we've all heard stories about police doing the wrong things. And the idea is that if they have their cameras on, perhaps it can prevent those sorts of things, and also protect the community. So just be aware that they exist and they're supposed to have them on if they're having meaningful interactions with the public. Some other powers of police, or police or PSOs, if you are drunk in a public place, or if you're acting what's called disorderly, they can either fine you or they can actually arrest you and take you back to the station, okay? This stuff's pretty straightforward, but just be mindful that police do have those powers, and they're, often very happy to use them. So just be careful if you are drinking, or if you are intoxicated in public, or if you may be doing something that's, causing a commotion in public. But just also be mindful that this does not include peaceful protests. So if you're engaging in peaceful protest, that is not something that they can categorize as disorderly, unless it becomes not peaceful, of course. Similarly, police have what's called move on powers. So again, if you are what's called disturbing the peace, or you're acting in a disorderly manner, they can tell you to leave the area, okay? And they can say, don't come back to this area for 24 hours. If you refuse that direction, usually any direction that police give you, if you refuse it, well, not always, but often, if you refuse it, they can fine you or they can charge you with a criminal offence. And again, if you get charged with a criminal offence, that means a court date and potentially a criminal record. So just be very careful if police are telling you to move on. Have a think about whether you want to ask them if their body-worn camera's on, if you think they're being unfair. But usually it is best to comply rather than challenging them, because you just don't want to risk them charging you and you ending up with a court date and potentially a criminal record. And even if you don't end up with a criminal record, say that the charge is unfair and someone like myself helps you get off it, it's still a whole stress. Going to court, having to get a lawyer, having to deal with police. So find a balance, but it is sometimes best to cooperate and comply with their requests. Again, this does not apply to peaceful protests, but the key there is peaceful. And we've seen a lot about protests recently. And what police would say is anytime they've done something to stop the protests or to arrest someone or whatever, it's because it's turned not peaceful. But that's been a very tricky and hotly debated area lately. Weapons laws. Now, weapons, basically you can't carry weapons, even for self-defense. And if you are found with a weapon by police or PSOs, you can be charged. And again, you can go to court and end up with a record which says that you had possession of a weapon, which is not anything that anyone wants. Not only do you get a criminal record, but you might, as the screen suggests, get a big fine. Press the button a lot of times for all these to come up. So on the screen, it's pretty self-explanatory what a weapon is, but just be mindful. There's things that are obviously weapons. You can see like the pocket knife. You can see like the knuckle dusters, but there are things, the glass bottle. So things that are normal items which can be changed into a weapon by whatever you've done to it. So you smashed glass, that becomes a weapon. Or there are things which are normal tools, like you can see the tool there on the top left, that drill or whatever, or a hammer. These things are regular tools which have a proper purpose. But if you are not carrying them or using them for that proper purpose, then it is a weapon and it is an offence as well. Okay, so just be very careful about those sorts of things. And the last bit of sort of information before we get to some questions in this area is about graffiti. So there are a number of graffiti offences, and so it's illegal to mark graffiti unless you have permission of the owner of the property. It's illegal to have possession of graffiti implements, so things like spray cans, paint, that kind of thing. If police can prove that you had an intention to use them for graffiti, and so that might be because they have some evidence somehow from someone that was your intention, or sometimes, and this is sort of going astray a little bit, but sometimes police won't know that you intend to use it for graffiti, and they'll ask you some questions about it when they find you with it. They'll say, well, what are you doing with these? And because maybe you're just a little bit intimidated or a bit scared and you just want to try and cooperate to not get in trouble, you'll say, oh yeah, sorry, I was planning on doing graffiti. And therefore police all of a sudden then have a basis to give you this charge as well as just possessing graffiti. So be mindful that when police are asking you questions, as I said before, you have to give them your name and address, but you don't have to give them anything else. And sometimes they're asking you questions to get you to dob yourself in, get you to make what's called an admission. So just be very careful that about that. And after you've given them your name and address, you can say nothing. You can say no comment, okay? To give them nothing extra with which they can use to charge you with a higher offence or some sort of offence. And one last thing, point 2 there is that it is an offence to have graffiti implements on public transport, okay, or other certain places, even if you have no intention or police can't prove you have an intention of using them for graffiti. It's an offence to have them on public transport unless you've got what's called a lawful excuse. So for example, a lawful excuse is employment, for example. So if you've got them with you because you're doing a job, something like that. But unless you've got a lawful excuse and you have spray cans in your bag on a train, then police can charge you even if they have no proof about what you intend to use them for. Okay, so just be very careful with graffiti implements around public transport. Okay, so I'm going to do a number of polls throughout the session. I'm just having a look at the Q&A. It doesn't look like anyone's put anything in, but please feel free to put something in if you like. Now, these polls, I'm aware that a number of you will be using your own device. And so what will happen is it'll just pop up on your screen. You just click, for example, this one will be true or false. But some of you are groups using a single device. So you might be in the classroom. So I'll just be mindful that maybe you might need a little bit extra time to sort of work out what answer you want to give as your group. But if you find that I've gone ahead and exited the poll too quickly before you could put your answer in, perhaps just put something in the chat or whatever to let me know, to ask me to give you a little bit more time for the next question. Okay. So we've just launched the first poll. So the question is, a police officer can come up and ask you for your name and address anytime they want. So go ahead and put your answer in. Am I seeing, I'm just trying to work out if I'm seeing the answers come up. I'm not seeing the answers, people answering. So Helen, there's someone offside doing this. Someone in one of the black screens. I know there's 180 participants, sorry. So perhaps if we get at least half of them responding, then that's probably enough time to close the poll and share the results. But I'll leave that with you. We'll give another sort of maybe 15 seconds for those groups that might need a little bit more time to answer the poll. And then we'll share the results and I'll tell you the answer. So think about it. So the poll's ended. Are we able to share the results? Here we go. A police officer can come up and ask you for your name and address anytime they want. We've got 70%, so 147. So it's good. About 80% of you answered. Thank you for that. So 70% saying false and 30% saying true. Well, it's kind of like both answers are correct, but the starting point is that it's false. That police, the starting point is they can't come up to you anytime and just ask you, who are you? What's your address? They do have that power if they're in certain places like a train station, but otherwise they don't have that power unless, and I'll come back to the screen where I've gone ahead too much, unless they have one of those triggers. So they think you've committed an offence, they think that you're about to, or they think you have relevant information about an offence. And when I say they think, it's what's called a reasonable basis. So it's very much a grey area. And so sometimes you might be like, why are you asking me my details? I've got nothing to do with this. But again, if you refuse, it can be a criminal offence. So sometimes they might think they have a reasonable basis, or they might know things that you don't. So sometimes it might just be better to comply with it. But remember the body-worn camera if you think you are being unfairly dealt with. Next poll, you have to, so if they come up and ask you for your name and address, you have to also tell them your age. True or false? If we could launch this poll as well. Go ahead, everyone. A few more seconds. So I think that might be enough, hopefully. All right, so 130 people responded, which is good. False. You do have to tell the police your age. No, you have to tell the police your age. False. False is the correct answer. Sorry. I was just confusing myself there. Here we are. No, so the only things you have to tell them are name and address. You never actually have to tell them your age. Even if they take you back to the station, you don't have to tell them. Name and address is all you have to do. And you can say no comment to every other thing that they ask, even if they take you back for a formal interview. Okay. And in fact, not giving them other information can sometimes be to your benefit if they're suspecting you of an offence. However, if you're under 18, sometimes it actually is better for you to tell them that you're under 18, because they have different approaches to how they deal with a 16 or 17-year-old than how they deal with a 19 or 20-year-old. You'll get a much more lenient, put it simply, a more lenient approach from police if you're underage. So if you are underage, which most of you are still, it is better to let them know, by the way, I'm only 16. Okay, because it's just better, it's in your interests. Is it okay to, so poll 3, is it okay to carry a pocket knife? So there's 3 options here. Yes, you can carry one as long as you don't plan to hurt anyone with it. Yes, you can do it as long as you have a good reason. So for example, if you have to travel through a dangerous neighborhood, so you've maybe got it there for self-defense or protection or some other good reason, or no, never allowed. Go ahead. I am a little bit mindful of time, so perhaps if we get half of the responses, so about 90 or 100, we can stop the poll there. Okay, no, so 75% of the responses said no, never allowed. Let's have a look what the correct answer is. So they're the options, and correct answer is yes, no, never allowed. Some people said the other answers, but it's just very important to know things that are weapons, like a pocket knife is just a weapon. There's no, that's what it is, or something that's definitely a weapon. You cannot have it on you at all, ever. So just be very careful of that. And because if police have a basis for thinking you've, committed an offence or something, they're probably going to search you. And if you've got a pocket knife in your bag or something, and you think, oh, I just got it there, for self-defense and never know, you're going to get charged. Almost certainly you'll get charged. And yeah, obviously that's not good. Now, I'm a little bit mindful of time, so I'm not going to actually launch these polls. I'm just going to answer them because we've only got about 20 minutes left. Is it okay to carry a baseball bat? Here's the options here. yes, it's okay because it's sporting equipment. Yes, you can, as long as you're on your way to the baseball field or you're at the field, or no, it's a weapon, so it's never allowed. The correct answer to this is, think about a baseball bat, similar to things like tools, like drills or hammer or whatever. They are legitimate items. And so you can carry them as long as you're doing it for their legitimate purpose. So as long as you are on your way to the baseball field or you're actually there playing, you can have your baseball bat with you. Or with tools, as long as you're on site or for whatever reason you're driving between sites and you've got your tools in your car, you can have them. But if you can't show police that that you've got that legitimate purpose for that item, then it is a weapon and it is an offence. Okay, so answer there is B. And I'm just going to skip ahead and not do this question because I'm just mindful of time. It's about graffiti, and just a reminder that you can't have graffiti implements with you on public transport unless you've got what's called a lawful excuse. So unless you need them with you for work or something like that, or you need them with you for your studies. But always better to leave them where you use them, like leave them at school or leave them at wherever you use them. So your rights at work. So as I said at the start, and everyone, please feel free to put stuff in the Q&A as we go, and I'll try and get to them. Your rights at work. So from age 15, which most of you will be at least 15, you can get a job. It's very important to know what your status is. And when I mean status, I mean, are you full-time, are you part-time, or are you casual? Most of you will know these things and will have probably heard of at least casual. And most of you will be casual. And casual basically means that you don't really have an ongoing contract with the employer. What you actually have is that every time you have a shift, you have a contract with the employer for that 3 hours or for that 4 hours, but otherwise you don't really. It's a bit more complex than that. But basically, if you're casual, you don't have all those rights of an ongoing contract as a full-timer or a part-timer, which there's a question about, which I'll talk more about when we do the question. And just be mindful of, there are minimum rates that you have to be paid, regardless of whether you're working at a fish and chip joint or regardless of whether you're working at a well-known business like Woolworths or something. Okay, just so that you have an idea, a ballpark, for a 16-year-old, the minimum is about $10 an hour. But if you are casual, you get what's called loading, and the loading is an extra pay to compensate you because you don't have the rights of a full-time or part-time employee. So your loading rate on top of $10 is 25%. So actually, if you're casual, your base rate should be for a 16-year-old about $12.50 an hour. And then you get more on Saturdays, more on Sundays, and more on public holidays. So just be mindful. Have a think about what you're getting paid an hour. Have a look at your pay slip. If you think that seems a bit low, go to this picture on the screen, Fair Work Ombudsman. You go to the website and they actually have this like thing you can do where you click through and you find out what your rate should be, okay? Or come and ask a place like Youth Law, okay? Particularly with very small businesses, often that maybe they won't even know that they're doing the wrong thing, but often they're not paying you the right amount. In addition to your rate, you're also entitled to superannuation, which is about 10% extra, okay, on top of your rate, even if you're casual, okay? Now, a few polls here as well. Having a look at the time. So I'm going to finish this up at 10:50. So I'll do a couple polls here and then we'll get on to the next section. All employees are entitled to be paid for sick days. If we could try and launch that poll. All employees are entitled to be paid for sick days. The question could also be, all employees are entitled to be paid for annual leave. Same answer. So that might be enough. So I'm sorry if some people aren't getting enough time to answer these polls. It's just because we've only got 15 minutes left. So I want to get through all the content, but you can always come and ask me afterwards if you have questions or whatever. 70% said false, 30% said true. So the correct answer is false. All employees are not entitled to sick days, and they're also not entitled to annual leave. And this comes back to that question of what's your status. If you are casual, which most of you probably will be if you have a part-time job, or if you get a part-time job, you're not entitled to be paid for sick leave, for sick days. You also don't get your annual leave. So like your parents, for example, might have full-time jobs and they'll probably get 4 weeks of annual leave a year. If you are casual, you don't get that. Okay. But you are compensated by getting what's called that loading, like I talked about before, the extra 25%. Okay. So no sick leave, no annual leave if you are casual, but you do get these things if you are part-time or full-time. Okay. Next poll. If you are a casual employee, your boss can stop giving you shifts at any time. If we could launch this one, true or false? So casual, which most of you will be. So think about, this happens a lot. Like you work in retail, and after the summer finishes, your boss just stops giving you shifts because there's just not as many customers. Is that okay? Can they do that? It sounds unfair. What do you think? True or false? That might be enough. So we've got true, 84% said true and 16% said false. So again, every single question, the majority are answering it correctly. So it's good. The answer is true. Your boss can stop giving you shifts at any time if you are casual. And that's because you don't have how I was trying to describe, you don't have an ongoing contract where you have to get a certain number of hours or a certain number of shifts. You do have that if you are part-time or full-time, and you can demand those hours or to be paid even if they don't have work for you. But if you are casual, they can just stop you at any time. And this often will happen if, there's just not as many customers or because of the seasonality of the place. However, in some cases, even if you are casual, if they're stopping your shifts for another reason, for a non-legitimate reason, for example, there's some sort of, they just being unfair towards you, or they don't like you for some reason, and it's not really a fair reason, or because you're being a pain because you're asking them some questions about your entitlement to how much you should be getting paid, for example. So you think you're not getting paid enough, you go and ask them, and then next week you've got no shifts. Those things can be what's called adverse action or unfair dismissal. And those things are not legal. And even if you are casual, you can rely on those things to make a claim and get compensation. If you think something like that's happened to you, you can speak to Youth Law or another service, and you can make a claim, and we can help you, guide you as to how to make that claim. Okay. So just very important to know, because often people won't want to ask questions about what they're getting paid or whatever, or how they're being treated, or they're not getting paid for the total time that they've worked, but they don't want to ask those questions because they worry that they won't get shifts. If you're doing that and they stop giving you shifts, they can't do that, and you might be entitled to compensation. Okay. I won't launch this one, but I'll just answer it, which is as an employer, you're obliged to pay for their uniform. So if you work at Macca's, you've got to pay for their uniform. Or if you work in the Nike store like this one, you've got to buy Nike clothes to work on your shift. So the question is, are you obliged to pay for these things? The answer is generally false, which might seem a bit weird because we've probably all heard of people that work in retail stores where they say, we'll give you a 20% discount, but you've got to wear our clothes. The bigger sort of companies like Woolworths here almost always will give you their stuff for free. But some of the smaller, more boutique places will say, yeah, you've got to wear our clothes, but we'll give you a 20% discount. The answer is generally they can't do that unless it's somehow reasonable. And it will only be reasonable if they give you a really significant discount or if the clothes aren't too expensive. Okay. So particularly if it's boutique and it's expensive and you're like, I spent my whole pay slip buying my outfit for the next shift, that's probably not reasonable. So just have a think about, is it reasonable given how much I'm getting paid, given how much the clothes cost? If you think it's not, it probably isn't. And then you can make a claim or do something, or you can come and speak to us and we can help you with it. Okay. Next section is relationships. So we've only got 10 minutes left. I'm just going to have a quick look to see if I've been getting Q&As. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to them. Just seeing if there's anything. Are these laws all around Victoria, all around Australia? There are some differences, but most of the things I've talked about so far are Australia-wide, or generally Australia-wide. I'll answer all those questions afterwards. Like I said, I just don't, or at the end of the presentation if I get a chance. Okay. Relationships. So what I'm going to talk about with relationships is the age of consent laws. So what age can you be to have sex or engage in sexual activity with another person? How far can the gap be between you in terms of age? And I'll also talk about briefly on things like sexting, sending sexting text messages or photos or whatever. And I'll also talk about what to do if you're maybe feeling unsafe in a relationship. Okay. So consent laws. So I believe most of you are about 15 to 17. And so some of you will maybe be 18 soon. If you're 15, there's what's called the 24-month rule, which means you cannot engage in sexual activity with anyone who is more or less than 24 months older or younger than you, okay? And you've got to be very mindful of when your birthdays are. So if you're 15 and they're 13, that might be okay, but it might also not be okay. It depends when your birthdays are, because it could be that the 15-year-old's turning 16 before the 13-year-old's turning 14. So you're actually more than 24 months older than them, okay? So just be very, very mindful of the 24-month rule. And it's the older person in the relationship that is the one that is at risk of a criminal offence there, okay? Not the younger person. And if you are 16 or 17, again, the 24-month rule will apply if it's someone younger than you. But if it's older than you, if you're 16 or 17, the rule basically is that you can engage in sexual activity with someone of any age as a 16 or 17-year-old, above you, that is. So you could be, with a 30-year-old or 25-year-old, whatever, as long as they aren't in a position of authority or position of care or something like that, okay? So for example, could potentially be someone like a family friend sort of thing, or it could potentially be like a teacher or someone that, through school or something like that, could be in what's called a position of authority, okay? Sexting. Now, this is about sending photos or text messages or videos that are of sexual nature, okay? I think we all know what this is. Can you do it? This is one where the rules do differ depending on the state you're in, but in Victoria, the rule is that if you're under 18, you can do it. But again, you have to comply with that 24-month rule, okay? So a 15 and 17-year-old may or may not be able to do it depending on when their birthdays are, okay? And again, it's the older person that will get in trouble. The younger person is not committing any offence. If you are over 18 and your partner is under 18, technically, actually, the older person cannot do it, okay? And could be guilty of a criminal offence. However, if it's a 18-year-old and 17-year-old, it's a consensual relationship, everything's fine, there's no issues going on, it's very unlikely it would get reported. And secondly, even if it got reported, it's very unlikely police would prosecute, okay? So just bear that in mind. But technically, if you're 18 and they're 17, you can't do it. Only if you're both under 18, or if you're both over 18. And one other thing in bold here is that you can't share. So if you receive something from your partner who is a teenager or under 18, even if they say you're allowed to share it on, you can't. So they can't consent to you sharing on their image or video or something to other people, okay? And if you do share it with someone else, then that's a criminal offence, okay? If you're in a relationship, or if it's an intimate relationship, or even just some sort of friendship or whatever, and you're being abused or you're the victim of violence or harassment or stalking, there are absolutely means of help, okay? So there are a number of, oh, that's an alarm to tell me that we've only got 5 minutes left. You can apply for what's called an intervention order, also known as a restraining order, which can say things like no contact between them, but they can't contact you. They can't come and see you. If they see you in public, they can't talk to you, that kind of thing. But there are also a number of criminal offences which cover this kind of conduct. So if you're the recipient of bullying online, for example, someone threatening you or abusing you online, that's a criminal offence, okay? Or if someone's harassing you for whatever reason, again, might also be a criminal offence. So you can go to police and they might charge the other person, or they might get an intervention order for you to stop them doing that, okay? We'll do one poll here and then we'll move on. So this poll is, so if we could launch this one, bearing in mind we've only got 5 minutes left. We're launching this one. I can't see if it's coming up. One moment, everyone. I can't tell if that's, for whatever reason, I can't see if that poll's coming up, but I will read it. Mohammed is 15, his partner Sam is 17. They've been engaging in sexual activity together. They're both always very careful to make sure that they're both consenting and they're both happy with what they're doing. Has a sexual offence been committed by either of them? Still can't see the poll, so I'm not sure if that's my issue about the poll. It seems like it's not working. Okay, that's okay. It might be the last one we do. So have a think about this yourself. So we can't do the poll. Sorry about that, technical issue. So again, we've got Mohammed 15, Sam 17. They're engaging in sexual activity. Have either of them committed an offence? So the first one is no, because they're consenting. It's fine. The second one is yes. They've committed an offence because they're both underage. The third one is yes, but only Sam, the older one, has committed an offence. And fourthly, maybe, depending on when their birthdays are. So have a think about that. 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. The answer is D, which is that maybe. So it's the 24-month rule. Same as sexting. If you're underage, 24-month rule. So while it might appear that they're 2 years apart, so they're within the 24 months, it depends when their birthdays are, because if the older person, Sam, turns 18 next month, but Mohammed's not 16 until, next year or later in the year or whatever, then it's more than 24 months, okay? And then it's an offence. All right, so just be very careful. It's a strict 24 months. I'm just going to skip ahead this one and go to the next topic, as we only have a couple minutes. What I might do, so buying stuff, I'm just going to really quickly give you a couple of points about buying stuff. So there's a thing called, because as you might be earning a bit of money yourself by working or becoming more independent, there's a thing called consumer guarantees, okay? So just be mindful, if you buy something, the product has to be what's called fit for purpose. It has to do the job that it says it would. So it has to clean the certain thing or do a certain thing that it says it would. Or if the shop employee says it will do something, it has to do that. Or even if the shop employee knows that you intend to use it for a particular reason, then it has to do that thing. Otherwise, you're entitled to a refund, okay? The product also has to be of what's called acceptable quality. So if it breaks after, 6 months, that's probably not acceptable quality, okay? Now, bear in mind, there's this thing called warranties, which really, a lot of the time, is a little bit of a scam, in my view, in that they might say, oh, why don't you buy the extended 18 months warranty? It's only an extra this. Often, these warranties are already built into the law. And so if you buy for example, we bought a vacuum a bit over a year ago for like $300, maybe $400, and it stopped working after a bit over a year. And I think it was outside the 12-month warranty. But if you buy a vacuum worth that much, you expect it's going to last about 5 years or something, maybe 3 to 5 years at least. And so it's not of acceptable quality if it breaks after a bit over a year. And so we were able to get a refund for that. Okay. Now, just lastly, I've got about 1 minute and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about driving. So important things to know as a driver when you get your L's or when you maybe get your P's soon. So as an L plater, you must have a supervising driver. They must be of at least 21 years of age. As a red P, you can only have one passenger in your car between 16 and 22. If you're on your L's or your P's at all, you can't have any alcohol in your system. Strict liability offences. So most driving offences are what's called strict liability. You might have heard of this term. What it means basically is that not knowing that the speed limit was this, or not knowing something was going on, or not knowing your car was not roadworthy is not a defence. Or not knowing that your license was suspended because of demerit points, that's not a defence. It's your responsibility to know these things, and so you'll be guilty even if you didn't know that that was a speed limit. Look, I am going to wrap it up there. Well, I'll just take you this last poll. Very important. People think that you can use your mobile phone if you, like for GPS, if you have it on a hands-free device, and you've got it connected by Bluetooth. As a P plater and L plater, you actually can't do this. And often we see people get pulled over doing this and they don't know. So just be very careful. Until you're off your Ps, you can't use your phone at all. Okay, even just for GPS. So look, I'm sorry I had to rush that a little bit, but we are just out of time now. Lastly, if you have any questions, I'll send around, you'll receive my details in the slides and you can contact us, or you can give our phone service line a call any day. Please follow us on social media, all those platforms. We've even just about to launch a TikTok. Would you believe it? A legal centre doing a TikTok. So we'll see how that goes. But give us a follow on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok once it's going if you're interested. Yeah, sorry again that we had to rush through that end bit and I wasn't able to get to all the questions, but I will send something around to all the participants with answers to those questions, and please get in contact if you want to have a chat with me about anything. Okay, thank you all so much, and I'll turn